The gallows rope swayed ominously in the morning breeze as Olivia Zimmerman stood before the town of Copper Creek, her hands bound behind her back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild mustang trying to break free. The year was 1878, and in this dusty corner of Arizona territory, a woman who dared to flee from her arranged marriage was considered no better than a common horse thief. Olivia Zimmerman, the town magistrate declared, his voice carrying across the silent crowd, for the crime of abandoning your lawful betrothal to Mr. Elias Thornton, breaking sacred contract and bringing shame upon this God-fearing community, you are hereby banished from Copper Creek and all surrounding territories under our jurisdiction. Olivia lifted her chin defiantly, even as tears threatened to spill from her emerald eyes. At 22, she had endured enough of Elias Thornton's cruelty during their brief courtship to know that marriage to him would be a prison far worse than any banishment. Her auburn hair, normally pinned properly beneath a bonnet, had come loose in the struggle when they dragged her back to town, giving her the wild appearance of the criminal they claimed her to be. You have until sundown to gather your belongings and leave, the magistrate continued. Should you return, the consequences will be severe. May God have mercy on your wayward soul. The crowd parted as Sheriff Miller cut her bindings. Some faces showed sympathy, most displayed disgust, but none offered help. Olivia had been the schoolteacher, respected if not entirely embraced by the community that had taken her in after her parents died of fever 2 years prior. Now she was nothing but a disgrace. I would rather face banishment than be sold like cattle to that monster, Olivia said loudly enough for those nearest to hear. My father never agreed to this match before his passing. Elias Thornton, a man of 40 with cold eyes and a prosperous silver mine, stepped forward. You've made your choice, Miss Zimmerman. The contract was signed by your guardian after your father's death. I offered you security and position. Instead, you chose disgrace. I chose freedom, she replied, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had left angry red marks. Thornton's smile never reached his eyes. We shall see how sweet your freedom tastes in the wilderness. 3 hours later, Olivia had packed her meager possessions. 2 dresses, a woolen shawl, her mother's silver hairbrush, a small pouch containing $27, her entire savings, and her father's old medical textbook. She had resigned herself to her fate when Martha Miller, the sheriff's wife, slipped into the small room above the schoolhouse. I cannot help you stay, child, Martha whispered, pressing a small parcel into Olivia's hands, but I can help you survive. There's dried beef, hardtack, and matches. Take my husband's old canteen, too. Thank you, Olivia said, embracing the older woman. For everything, head north, Martha advised. Beyond Coyote Ridge there's a valley. Few know of it, but it's got water and good soil. It's beyond Thornton's reach. How will I find it? Follow Deadman's Creek upstream. When you reach the forked pine, turn east until you see 3 stacked boulders like a chimney. The valley lies beyond. With these directions committed to memory and her worldly possessions secured on a borrowed mule, Olivia Zimmerman rode out of Copper Creek as the sun began its descent, feeling the weight of hateful stares on her back, but also an unexpected lightness in her heart. The desert was unforgiving in April. Days blazed hot enough to make the air shimmer. Nights dropped to freezing, forcing Olivia to wrap herself in her shawl and huddle close to small, precious fires. She rationed her provisions carefully, stretching what should have lasted 3 days into 5 as she followed Deadman's Creek deeper into territory unknown to her. On the 6th day, as thirst clawed at her throat and her mule, whom she had named Liberty in a moment of dry humor, grew increasingly stubborn, disaster struck. The animal stepped into a prairie dog hole, letting out a terrible cry before collapsing. Olivia was thrown forward, landing hard on rocky ground. When she examined Liberty's leg, she found it badly broken. The decision tore at her heart, but mercy demanded action. Using her father's revolver, which Martha had slipped into her saddlebag, she ended Liberty's suffering with tears streaming down her face. Taking what supplies she could carry, Olivia continued on foot, her own body aching from the fall. By nightfall, fever had set in, likely from a wound on her arm that had gone unnoticed in the shock of losing liberty. As darkness enveloped the landscape, Olivia collapsed beneath a scrubby juniper tree, certain she would not see the morning. She dreamed of water-cool, clear water flowing over her hands. The sound of it rushing nearby seemed so real that, when she opened her eyes to the pink light of dawn, she was momentarily confused to find herself still beneath the juniper. But the sound remained. Forcing herself to sit up, ignoring the pounding in her head, Olivia realized she wasn't hallucinating. Water flowed in a small stream just 20 yards from where she had collapsed. Crawling to the edge, she drank deeply, then bathed her face and cleaned the angry gash on her arm. The cool water revived her enough to take stock of her situation. She had lost most of her supplies with Liberty, and the forked pine Martha had mentioned was nowhere in sight. She was lost, injured, and alone in terrain that could kill an experienced frontiersman, let alone a schoolteacher whose wilderness knowledge came primarily from books. "One step at a time, Olivia," she told herself, her voice sounding strange in the vast emptiness around her. "Find food, find shelter, keep moving north." She followed the stream, reasoning that it would lead to larger water sources and possibly signs of habitation. By midday, the terrain began to change, becoming more rugged as the flat desert gave way to rocky outcroppings and sparse juniper forests. Her fever had broken, but weakness remained, making each step a conscious effort. As the sun began to set, Olivia spotted smoke rising in the distance. Caution warred with desperation. The smoke could mean many things: friendly settlers, hostile natives, or worse, bounty hunters sent by Thornton. In her condition, however, she had little choice but to investigate. She approached slowly, using the increasing tree cover for concealment. The smoke came from a small cabin nestled against a rocky hillside. A corral held 3 horses, and a garden patch showed signs of careful tending. Most reassuring was the absence of multiple men or signs of a large camp. This appeared to be a solitary homestead. Gathering her courage, Olivia stepped into the clearing. Before she could call out, the cabin door swung open, and she found herself staring down the barrel of a Winchester rifle. "That's far enough," came a deep voice. "State your business or start walking away while you still can." The man holding the rifle was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it met the collar of his worn flannel shirt. His face, partially obscured by several days' worth of beard, was tanned and weathered, but his eyes, a startling blue even in the fading light, were clear and alert. "I mean no harm," Olivia said, raising her hands slowly. "I've been traveling for days. My mule broke its leg, and I've been on foot since yesterday. I saw your smoke and hoped." Her voice trailed off as a wave of dizziness swept over her. The man's expression shifted from suspicion to concern as he lowered his rifle. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she insisted, even as the world began to tilt around her. The last thing Olivia remembered was the stranger lunging forward as her knees buckled and darkness claimed her once again. She awoke to the crackling of a fire and the smell of something savory that made her stomach growl painfully. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was back in her small room above the schoolhouse. Then the events of the past week came rushing back, and she sat up with a gasp. "Easy now," said the man from earlier, moving from his position by the fireplace. "You've been out for hours." Olivia found herself lying on a narrow cot covered with a clean, if patched, quilt. Her arm had been cleaned and bandaged properly, and someone had removed her boots. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice raspy. "My home," he answered simply, offering her a cup of water. "Name's Jackson Adams. Most folks call me Jack." "Olivia Zimmerman," she replied after drinking deeply. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Adams." "Jack," he corrected, returning to stir whatever was cooking in the pot over the fire. "And you can thank me by explaining what a woman like you is doing wandering alone in territory that'd give most men pause." There was no accusation in his tone, only genuine curiosity and perhaps a hint of concern. Olivia weighed her options. This man had undoubtedly saved her life, but revealing too much could be dangerous. If Thornton had indeed sent men after her, or if word of her banishment had spread, Jackson Adams might decide she was more trouble than she was worth. I'm looking for a place, she said finally. A valley beyond Coyote Ridge. I was told it has water and good soil. Jack's eyebrows rose. You're looking for Hidden Valley. He shook his head, ladling stew into a wooden bowl. That's another 3 days' journey from here, assuming you know the way and aren't half dead from infection. He handed her the bowl and a spoon. Eat. We'll talk more after you've got something in your stomach. The stew was simple rabbit, wild onions, and some kind of tubers, but to Olivia, it was the finest meal she'd ever tasted. She ate slowly, savoring each bite and studying her surroundings. The cabin was small but well-built, with tight seams that kept out drafts. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while shelves holding books, tools, and supplies lined another. A table with 2 chairs sat near a window covered with oiled paper, and a curtain partially concealed what she assumed was Jack's sleeping area. Everything spoke of careful craftsmanship and practical consideration. This is a lovely home, she offered, setting aside her empty bowl. Jack's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. It serves its purpose. Now, Miss Zimmerman, I think it's time for some honesty between us. You're running from something or someone. Out here, secrets can get people killed. The directness of his approach startled her, but Olivia recognized the wisdom in his words. With a deep breath, she told him everything: her parents' deaths, becoming a ward of the town council, Elias Thornton's arrangement with her guardian, his cruelty during courtship, her escape attempt, and finally, her banishment. Jack listened without interruption, his expression darkening when she described Thornton's behavior and the town's response. When she finished, he stood and paced the small confines of the cabin. Thornton, he muttered. I know of him. His mine operations push into Apache lands despite treaties. He's not a man who accepts defeat easily. You think he'll come looking for me? Olivia asked, fear tightening her chest. A man like that. His pride won't let him forget being publicly rejected. Jack stopped pacing and faced her. Hidden Valley would be safe. It's beyond his usual territory and few know how to find it, but you won't make it there alone, not in your condition. I don't have much choice. I can't stay here and put you at risk. No, he agreed, you can't stay here. Before disappointment could fully register, he continued, which is why I'll take you to Hidden Valley myself. Olivia stared at him, searching for signs of deception or ulterior motives. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Jack's eyes met her steadily. Let's just say I understand what it means to seek a fresh start. Besides, he added with that same hint of a smile, I've been meaning to hunt in that area anyway. Something in his tone suggested there was more to his offer than simple altruism, but Olivia was in no position to refuse help. Thank you, she said simply. Don't thank me yet. We leave at first light and it won't be an easy journey. He gestured to the cot. Get some rest. I'll sleep by the fire tonight. As Olivia settled back onto the cot, pulling the quilt over her shoulders, she watched Jack prepare his bedroll on the floor. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steady confidence that suggested he was a man accustomed to facing challenges head-on. For the first time since leaving Copper Creek, she felt a flicker of hope that she might actually survive this ordeal. Just before sleep claimed her, a thought occurred that should have troubled her more than it did. She was putting her life in the hands of a complete stranger, a man who chose to live alone in the wilderness, far from civilization. Yet somehow, instinct told her that Jackson Adams was precisely the ally she needed. The morning dawned clear and cool as Jack readied the horses. He had a sturdy buckskin gelding he called Buck, a dappled mare named Pepper, and a younger chestnut horse he'd been training. Olivia watched as he efficiently packed supplies: dried meat, coffee, flour, ammunition for his rifle, medical supplies, and various tools. Can you ride? He asked, leading Pepper over to where Olivia stood. Yes, though it's been some time, she admitted, remembering childhood lessons on her father's gentle mare before they'd moved to Copper Creek. Pepper's even-tempered. She'll forgive mistakes. Jack adjusted the stirrups to accommodate Olivia's height, then helped her mount. The mare stood patiently, seemingly unperturbed by her new rider. Once they were underway, Jack led them north along a narrow trail that would have been invisible to untrained eyes. He rode slightly ahead, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning of difficult terrain. They spoke little during those first hours, each lost in their own thoughts as they traveled deeper into increasingly rugged country. By midday, they stopped to rest the horses near a small spring. As Olivia stretched her legs, wincing at muscles unaccustomed to long rides, she noticed Jack scanning the horizon with a concerned expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "Just being cautious," he replied, though his eyes continued to search the distant ridgeline. "We're entering territory that's contested between settlers and the Apache. Best to keep our wits about us." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the spring breeze. "Are we in danger?" Jack's expression softened slightly at the worry in her voice. "Not especially. The local bands know me and we've maintained an uneasy peace, but strangers passing through can upset that balance." "You trade with them?" Olivia asked, surprised. Most settlers she knew viewed the Apache with fear and hostility, among other things. Jack handed her a strip of dried meat. "I helped their medicine man once when his daughter was sick with fever. Earned me some goodwill." "You know medicine," a shadow passed over Jack's face. "Enough to get by out here. Eat up, we've got a lot of ground to cover before nightfall." They continued their journey through increasingly beautiful country. Scrubby desert gave way to juniper forests, and occasionally they would crest a rise to reveal panoramic views of mountains in the distance. Despite her physical discomfort, Olivia found herself captivated by the wild beauty around them. As the sun began to set, Jack led them to a sheltered hollow where the remains of previous campfires indicated he had stopped here before. "We'll camp here tonight," he announced, dismounting and helping Olivia down from Pepper. "There's water nearby, and the rocks will hide our fire." Working together, they established a small but comfortable camp. Jack tended the horses while Olivia gathered wood and started a fire using the techniques he showed her. By the time darkness fell, coffee was brewing, and Jack was preparing a simple meal of beans, dried fruit, and biscuits mixed from flour and water, then cooked in a small iron skillet. "This is far better than my cooking attempts on the trail," Olivia remarked, accepting her portion gratefully. "Necessity teaches quickly out here," Jack replied, settling across from her. The firelight played across his features, softening the hard angles of his face. "Where did you learn to be a teacher?" The question caught Olivia off guard. It was the first personal inquiry he had made. "My father insisted on education, even for a daughter. We lived in St. Louis before moving west. I had tutors, then attended a women's seminary for 2 years. And then my father's health began failing. He was a doctor, but couldn't practice as much. We moved to Arizona Territory hoping the climate would improve his condition." She stared into the fire. "It didn't. After he and my mother passed, teaching was the only respectable profession available to me." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Education is valuable out here, rare too." "What about you?" Olivia ventured. "You speak well, have books in your cabin. You weren't always a—" She hesitated, unsure how to classify him. "Frontier hermit." He supplied with a rare smile that transformed his face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "No, I wasn't always hiding in the wilderness. I grew up in Pennsylvania. My father owned lumber mills. I was supposed to take over the family business." "What happened?" The smile vanished. "The war happened. I joined the Union Army in '61, saw things, did things, came back different." He set aside his empty plate. "Couldn't stomach going back to that life, to those expectations, headed west instead." Olivia sensed there was much more to his story but respected his reticence. "And you've been here ever since, more or less. Tried my hand at different things, trapping, prospecting, guiding, found I preferred solitude to most company." He looked at her directly. "Until occasionally I don't." The simple statement hung in the air between them, neither acknowledgement nor denial of the subtle shift occurring in their dynamic. Olivia felt her cheeks warm and was grateful for the firelight that might hide her reaction. "We should get some rest," Jack said, breaking the moment. "I'll take first watch, wake you for the second. You expect trouble, I expect nothing and prepare for everything." He handed her a blanket. "That's how you survive out here." As Olivia arranged her bedroll, she found herself studying Jack as he cleaned his rifle. There was an efficiency to his movements that spoke of long practice, but also a gentleness she hadn't expected. She had noticed it in how he handled the horses, in how he had treated her wound, and now in the careful way he prepared their camp, ensuring her comfort without drawing attention to his efforts. "Jack," she said softly as she settled beneath her blanket. He looked up, eyebrows raised in question. "Thank you, not just for guiding me, but for not asking me to justify my choices." He was silent for a long moment before responding. "A person's reasons are their own. Out here, actions matter more than explanations." With that simple philosophy, he returned to his task, and Olivia closed her eyes, finding comfort in the presence of this complicated man who seemed to understand the value of new beginnings better than anyone she had ever met. The next morning, a light rain fell, turning the trail muddy and slowing their progress. Jack led them higher into the foothills, following game trails that zigzagged up increasingly steep terrain. By midday, they had reached a ridge that offered a breathtaking view of the valley below, though clouds obscured the distant peaks. "There," Jack pointed toward a gap in the mountains ahead. "Beyond that pass is Coyote Ridge, and beyond that, Hidden Valley." Olivia shielded her eyes against the rain, trying to envision her destination. "It seems so far." "Another day and a half, weather permitting," he confirmed. "The pass can be tricky in rain." They continued their journey, the horses picking their way carefully over rocky ground. As they descended into a narrow canyon, Jack suddenly raised his hand, signaling Olivia to stop. His posture had changed, alert and tense. "What is it?" she whispered, feeling her heart rate accelerate. "Riders," he murmured, pointing to faint tracks in the mud. 3, maybe 4 horses. "Passed through recently. Thornton's men," fear crept into her voice. Jack studied the ground. "Can't say for certain. Could be Apache, could be prospectors." He frowned. "Best to avoid finding out. We'll take the high route." He led them up a nearly invisible trail that skirted the canyon rim. The path was treacherous, narrow, and steep, with loose rocks that threatened to send the horses stumbling. Olivia gripped Pepper's reins tightly, forcing herself to trust the mare's sure-footedness rather than trying to control their path. They had almost cleared the dangerous section when disaster struck. A boulder, loosened by the rain, tumbled down the slope behind them. The noise spooked Buck, who reared suddenly. Jack maintained his seat, but his packhorse, tethered behind, panicked and lost its footing on the narrow path. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The chestnut horse slid backward, dragging part of their supplies with it. Jack leaped from Buck and cut the lead rope with his knife, freeing his mount from being pulled down too. The packhorse tumbled down the rocky slope, letting out a terrified whinny before landing with a sickening thud at the bottom. "No!" Jack's anguished cry echoed through the canyon as he scrambled down the slope toward his fallen horse. Olivia dismounted carefully and secured both remaining horses before following him. By the time she reached the bottom, Jack was kneeling beside the chestnut, his hand gentle on its neck. The horse's breathing was labored, its legs bent at unnatural angles. Tears streaked Jack's dirt-smudged face as he whispered to the suffering animal. "I'm sorry, boy. I'm so sorry," he murmured, drawing his pistol. Olivia placed her hand on his shoulder. "I'll wait up there," she said softly, understanding he needed privacy for what came next. She had just reached the remaining horses when the gunshot echoed through the canyon. Minutes later, Jack rejoined her, his expression closed and hard. Without a word, he gathered what supplies he could salvage and redistributed them between Buck and Pepper. "Jack," Olivia began, "Don't," he cut her off. "We need to move. That shot might have been heard." They rode in silence for the next several hours, Jack's grief palpable in the rigid set of his shoulders. When they finally stopped to make camp as darkness fell, he went through the motions mechanically, speaking only when necessary. As they sat beside the small fire, Jack staring into the flames, Olivia finally broke the silence. "You cared for that horse." "Raised him from a colt," Jack said, his voice rough, "was going to be the best of the 3. What was his name? Promise." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Ironic, isn't it?" Olivia moved to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It wasn't your fault. The rain, the rocks, you couldn't have known. Should have taken the lower trail, risked meeting those riders instead of risking the horses on that path." He shook his head. Bad judgment. You were trying to protect me, she said quietly. Jack looked at her then, really looked at her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. And now we're both at greater risk. Lost half our supplies, including most of the ammunition and tools you'd need to start over in Hidden Valley. We'll manage, Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. You said yourself it's only another day's journey. Getting there is one thing, surviving there. He ran a hand through his hair. It's beautiful but harsh. Winters are long. You'd need shelter, provisions, knowledge of the land. I'm a quick learner, not quick enough. His voice softened. Not for this, not alone. The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Olivia waited, allowing him space to continue if he chose. Finally, Jack spoke again, his gaze returning to the fire. When I first found Hidden Valley 3 years ago, I considered settling there instead of where my cabin stands now. It's more fertile, better protected from the elements. But it's also more isolated. No trading posts within reasonable distance, no settlements to fall back on if things go wrong. Why show me this place then? Olivia asked, confused. Because it's beyond Thornton's reach, like you wanted. Because it's beautiful, and sometimes beauty matters as much as practicality. He paused. And because I thought I could help you establish yourself there before returning to my cabin. And now I'm not sure either of us would make it through winter with what supplies remain. He looked up at the stars now visible through breaking clouds. We have choices to make tomorrow. They sat in companionable silence until the fire burned low. As Olivia prepared for sleep, she found herself studying Jack's profile, understanding for the first time that his gruff exterior concealed a deep capacity for caring one that extended not just to animals, but perhaps to her as well. The realization both comforted and unsettled her. Morning brought clearer skies and a decision from Jack. We push through to Hidden Valley today, he announced as they broke camp. I want you to see it before we decide our next steps. The trail grew increasingly challenging as they climbed toward Coyote Ridge. In places, they dismounted and led the horses through particularly narrow passages. By midday, they reached the ridge itself, a dramatic stone formation that resembled a howling coyote when viewed from certain angles. There, Jack said, pointing ahead as they paused to rest. See that break in the trees? That's the entrance to the valley. An hour later, they passed through a natural gateway formed by towering pine trees and emerged into Hidden Valley. Olivia gasped at the vista before her. A meadow of tall grasses and wildflowers stretched for nearly a mile, bordered by stands of aspen and pine. A creek meandered through the center, widening into a small lake at the far end. Beyond rose protective mountain walls, their peaks still capped with snow. It's magnificent, she breathed, dismounting to better absorb the beauty around her. Yes, Jack agreed, a genuine smile breaking across his features. It is. They led the horses down to the creek, allowing them to drink while Jack pointed out the valley's features. Best place for a cabin would be there, against those rocks. Southern exposure protected from north winds. Soil in that direction is rich, good for gardening. Lake has trout. Woods have deer, turkey, rabbit. Olivia turned slowly, trying to envision a life here. It was everything Martha had promised, and more, a sanctuary far from Elias Thornton and the judgment of Copper Creek. Yet as she looked at the vast emptiness, she felt a wave of doubt. Could anyone really survive here alone? She asked quietly. Jack's expression grew serious. It would be difficult, not impossible, but he hesitated. When I first told you I'd bring you here, I planned to help you build a simple shelter, show you the basics, leave you supplies, now with what we lost yesterday. He shook his head. What are you suggesting? Jack paced along the creek bank, seemingly wrestling with his thoughts. Finally, he turned to face her directly. Come back with me to my cabin. Stay until spring. I can teach you what you need to know, help you prepare properly. When the snow melts, if you still want this place, I'll help you build something that will last. Olivia studied him, searching for hidden motives. You would let a stranger stay in your home for months. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Miss Zimmerman. The formality seemed deliberate, a reminder of the propriety he was offering. You'd have the cot. I'd keep to my space. It wouldn't be proper by town standards, but we're not in town, she finished for him. No, we're not. He looked around the valley. Out here, different rules apply. Survival first, propriety second. Olivia walked to the edge of the creek, considering her options. Staying with Jack meant putting her trust completely in a man she barely knew. Yet in their short acquaintance, he had shown more integrity and kindness than most men of her prior acquaintance. "Why would you do this?" she asked, turning back to him. "Take such responsibility for someone you just met." Jack was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Because I know what it means to start over with nothing," he finally said. "Because no one should have to do it alone if they don't have to," he paused. "And because I haven't enjoyed another person's company in a very long time, until now." The simple honesty of his answer moved her deeply. "If I accept, I insist on contributing, cooking, mending, whatever needs doing. I won't be a burden. Never thought you would be." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Is that a yes?" Olivia looked once more at the beautiful valley, then back at Jack. "Yes, until spring." They made camp by the lake that night, taking time to rest and plan their return journey. As they sat beside the fire, sharing the last of the coffee, Olivia found herself wondering about the man across from her. "You never finished telling me about yourself," she said. "How you ended up here." Jack added a stick to the fire. "Not much more to tell. After the war, I drifted west. Worked cattle drives in Texas, tried mining in Colorado, scouted for the Army briefly." "The Army, after what you saw in the war, needed the money," he said simply. "Wasn't proud of it. Quit when they wanted us to clear native settlements that weren't causing any trouble." His expression darkened. "Seen enough killing to last several lifetimes. And then you found your valley, not right away. Spent time with the Apache first, learning their ways. They respect a man who listens more than he talks." He looked up at the star-filled sky. "Found my place about 4 years ago. Built the cabin, made peace with my memories, or tried to." "What memories haunt you most?" Olivia asked softly. Jack was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Antietam," he finally said, the word itself seeming to carry weight. "I was 22. Had a best friend, Thomas. Known him since we were boys. We fought side by side until a Confederate shell landed in our company. Thomas died in my arms." He swallowed hard. 17 men from our hometown died that day. I lived, never understood why." Olivia's heart ached for the young man he had been, carrying such burdens. "Perhaps to become the man you are now," she suggested. "A man who helps others start anew." Jack's eyes met hers across the fire, vulnerability evident in their depths. "Perhaps," he acknowledged. "What about you?" "What memories follow you?" "My father's disappointment," she admitted. "He wanted sons to carry on his medical practice. Had only me. He loved me, but I always felt I wasn't quite enough." "Is that why you became a teacher, to prove your worth through education?" Olivia blinked, surprised by his insight. "I suppose so. I thought if I could shape young minds, it might compensate for being unable to be the son he wanted." "From what you've told me, your father was a fool if he couldn't see your value," Jack said firmly. "He wasn't a fool," she protested. "Just a man of his time. A time that would have you marry a cruel man twice your age rather than make your own way." Jack shook his head. Some traditions deserve to be broken. His words resonated with something deep within her. All her life, Olivia had tried to meet the expectations others set for her father, the town, society itself. Running from Thornton had been her first true act of defiance, and it had cost her everything she knew. Yet sitting here, beneath a vast sky in this hidden paradise, with a man who seemed to see her more clearly than anyone ever had, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "Some traditions do deserve breaking," she agreed softly. "And some new paths deserve following, however uncertain." Their journey back to Jack's cabin took 3 days, slowed by caution and the need to avoid the trails they had taken before. The weather held, but both riders remained alert for signs of the mysterious horsemen whose tracks they had spotted earlier. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as they approached the final ridge before Jack's homestead, he suddenly raised his hand, signaling Olivia to stop. His posture went rigid as he scanned the valley below. "What is it?" she whispered, following his gaze but seeing nothing unusual. "Smoke," he said tersely. "Too much smoke, wrong location." Now she saw it, a dark plume rising from where his cabin should be. Without another word, Jack urged Buck forward, picking up speed as they descended toward the valley floor. Olivia followed, fear clutching at her heart. They reached the clearing to find Jack's cabin reduced to smoldering ruins. The corral fence was broken, the garden trampled, and personal possessions scattered across the yard. Jack dismounted and moved through the destruction like a man in a trance, picking up a charred book here, a broken tool there. "Jack," Olivia said gently, dismounting and approaching him. "I'm so sorry." His face was a mask of controlled fury as he knelt to examine tracks in the dirt. 4 men. Stayed long enough to make sure it all burned, left heading south. He stood, brushing ash from his hands, toward Copper Creek. "Thornton," Olivia whispered, guilt washing over her. "He sent men after me and they found your home instead. Seems likely." Jack continued to survey the damage, his movements methodical despite his obvious anger. "They took what they could carry: ammunition, tools, food, destroyed the rest." "This is my fault," Olivia said, tears filling her eyes. "If I hadn't come this way, stop." Jack turned to face her. "You didn't burn my home. Men who think they can own people, own land that isn't theirs, they did this." He looked back at the ruins. "Besides, it's just wood and belongings, can be rebuilt." His calm acceptance amazed her. "How can you be so composed?" A grim smile touched his lips. "Not my first loss, Olivia. Won't be my last." He glanced at the setting sun. "We need to make camp elsewhere tonight. There's a cave system a mile east that will provide shelter." As they rode away from the destroyed homestead, Olivia couldn't help but look back, wondering if Jack's apparent acceptance masked deeper pain. He had lost his horse, now his home, all because he had chosen to help her. By rights, he should resent her presence, yet he rode steadily onward, already planning their next steps. The cave Jack led them to was more hospitable than Olivia expected: dry, with a natural chimney that would draw smoke from a small fire. While she cared for the horses, Jack disappeared briefly, returning with rabbits he had snared and wild onions he had gathered. They prepared a simple meal in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they sat beside the fire, eating, that Jack finally spoke. "We have decisions to make," he said quietly. "Different ones than before." Olivia nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Thornton's men know this area now. They may return or send others." Jack stared into the flames. "Hidden Valley might be our best option after all." "But you said winter there would be too difficult without proper supplies," Olivia reminded him. "It will be challenging," he acknowledged. "But we still have 2 strong horses, my hunting skills, and whatever we can salvage from trading posts between here and there." He looked at her directly. "Unless you'd prefer to try another direction entirely." The question wasn't just about geography, it was about trust, about whether she still wanted to align her future with his after the destruction he had suffered on her behalf. Olivia didn't hesitate. "Hidden Valley," she said firmly. "If you think we can manage it." Jack studied her face, seeming to search for any doubt. Finding none, he nodded once. "Together we can manage." He poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. "First light, we'll salvage what we can from the cabin ruins, then head north to Johnson's trading post. After that, straight to the valley before the first snow. How long do we have? 6 weeks, maybe less." He looked up at the cave ceiling. "It'll be close." That night, as Olivia tried to sleep on her bedroll near the cave entrance, she heard Jack moving restlessly on the other side of their small fire. Despite his outward calm, the loss of his home clearly weighed on him. Acting on impulse, she spoke into the darkness. "Jack, are you awake?" "Yes," came his reply, voice rough with unspoken emotion. "Would you tell me about the home you'll build in Hidden Valley?" There was a long pause before he answered, his tone softening. "It'll be larger than my old cabin. 2 rooms instead of 1, bigger windows facing south to catch winter sun. Stone fireplace with a proper cooking surface, maybe even glass in the windows if we can manage it." "It sounds wonderful," Olivia encouraged, hearing how the description seemed to soothe him. "The roof will be steep to shed snow, porch facing the lake. Room for a proper garden, maybe an orchard eventually." He continued describing details: storage spaces, furniture he would craft, improvements over his previous dwelling. As he spoke, Olivia realized he wasn't just describing a structure, he was creating a vision of a home. Not a solitary refuge like his previous cabin, but a place meant for sharing, for living rather than merely surviving. The awareness sent a warm current through her that had nothing to do with the fire's heat. "Thank you," she said when he finally fell silent. For what? He asked, puzzlement in his voice, for seeing possibility instead of loss, for teaching me to do the same. His response was so quiet she almost missed it. Some things, once lost, leave space for something better to grow. Dawn found them back at the burned cabin, sifting through the ashes for anything salvageable. They recovered more than Jack had initially hoped. His axe head needed a new handle, but was intact. Several cooking implements had survived, and a cache of seeds he had stored in a metal box remained viable. Most precious was a small leather pouch containing personal items. His mother's wedding ring, a pocket watch from his father, and a faded photograph of his family taken before the war. "I thought these were lost," he said, voice thick with emotion as he carefully wrapped them in a clean handkerchief Olivia offered. By midday, they had loaded their findings onto the horses and set off northward. Johnson's trading post was a 2-day ride, a small outpost that served trappers, prospectors, and the occasional settler brave enough to venture this far from established towns. They arrived as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The trading post consisted of a main building constructed of logs, a small stable, and a bunkhouse for travelers. As they approached, an older man with a magnificent white beard emerged, rifle in hand. "That you, Adams," he called, lowering his weapon as recognition dawned. "Heard you might have had trouble. News travels fast," Jack commented as they dismounted. "Riders came through yesterday bragging about burning out a hermit who harbored a fugitive woman." Johnson's eyes moved to Olivia. "Guess that'd be you, madam." "Olivia Zimmerman," she introduced herself, standing tall despite her travel-worn appearance. Johnson nodded respectfully. "Edward Johnson, any friend of Jack's is welcome here." He gestured toward the main building. "Come in. You look like you could use a hot meal and news." Inside, the trading post was warm and surprisingly well stocked. Shelves lined the walls, filled with essential supplies, tools, fabric, and preserved foods. A potbelly stove provided heat, and a small counter served as both business desk and dining table. Johnson's wife, Martha, no relation to Sheriff Miller's wife as she quickly clarified, brought them bowls of hearty stew and fresh biscuits. As they ate, Johnson shared what he knew. 4 men, working for someone named Thornton, said they were hunting a runaway woman who stole property. He glanced apologetically at Olivia. "Their words, not mine. Did they say where they were heading next?" Jack asked. "Back to Copper Creek to report, then plan to widen their search." Johnson stroked his beard thoughtfully. "One mentioned checking the old mining settlements north of here." "Away from Hidden Valley," Jack noted with relief. "That where you're heading?" When Jack nodded, Johnson continued, "Brave choice this late in the season. Winter comes early up there." "We don't have many options," Jack replied. "Need to stock up before we go." They spent the evening taking inventory of their needs and the contents of Johnson's store. The trader proved generous, offering fair prices and even throwing in extra supplies when he learned the full story of their situation. "Never did like Thornton," he confided as he helped Jack select axe handles and saw blades. "Man thinks money buys ownership of everything: land, animals, people." With Johnson's help, they acquired essential tools, food staples, warm clothing, ammunition, and even window glass, a luxury Jack insisted would make winter more bearable. The cost depleted most of Olivia's savings and required Jack to trade his gold pocket watch, but they left the following morning with laden packhorses and renewed determination. 5 days to the valley if the weather holds," Jack told Olivia as they rode away from the trading post. "Then the real work begins." The journey to Hidden Valley was arduous but uneventful. They traveled steadily, conserving the horses' strength while covering as much ground as possible each day. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew colder, and overnight frosts warned of the approaching winter. On the morning of the 5th day, they crested Coyote Ridge once more and looked down upon Hidden Valley, their new home. This time, Olivia viewed it not just as a sanctuary but as a challenge. The beauty remained breathtaking, but now she noted the practical aspects as well: where they would build, where they would hunt, how they would survive the isolation and harsh conditions. We should make camp by the lake tonight, Jack suggested as they descended. Tomorrow, we'll choose the exact spot for our cabin and begin clearing ground. Our cabin. The words sent an unexpected thrill through Olivia. Somehow, in the midst of disaster and flight, their fates had become intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated. She was no longer merely following Jack's lead or accepting his help, they were building a future together, whatever form that might take. The next morning dawned clear and cold. After a breakfast of coffee and johnnycakes, Jack led Olivia along the edge of the valley where forest met meadow, evaluating potential building sites. They settled on a spot backed by a natural stone formation that would provide protection from north winds and reflect heat from their fire. A small spring bubbled nearby, offering water even if the creek froze, and tall pines would supply building material without requiring long transport. "It's perfect," Olivia declared, turning in a circle to take in the view from what would become their front door meadow, creek, and distant lake framed by mountain peaks. "It'll do," Jack agreed, a rare full smile lighting his face. They worked from sunup to sundown each day for the next 3 weeks. Jack felled trees with practiced efficiency, teaching Olivia how to help strip bark and shape logs. Together they dug foundation trenches, gathered stones for the fireplace, and prepared the site. As promised, the cabin would have 2 rooms, a main living area with kitchen and fireplace, and a smaller bedroom with its own window. While Jack handled the heavier construction, Olivia proved her worth in countless other ways. She prepared their meals, organized supplies, gathered wild foods to supplement their stores, and learned to use Jack's rifle to hunt smaller game when he was occupied with building. In the evenings, exhausted but satisfied, they would sit by their campfire and plan the next day's tasks. As they worked side by side, the awkwardness that had characterized their early interactions gradually disappeared. They developed an easy rhythm, anticipating each other's needs, communicating with gestures as often as words. Olivia found herself studying Jack when he wasn't looking, the precise movements of his hands as he notched logs, the intensity of his concentration as he measured and cut, the rare but transformative smile that appeared more frequently as days passed. For his part, Jack seemed to shed layers of reserve as the cabin took shape. He began to tell stories of his travels, describe books he had read, even occasionally laugh at his own mistakes. One evening, as they sat beneath a sky ablaze with more stars than Olivia had ever seen, he surprised her by speaking of the future beyond mere survival. "We should plant an orchard come spring," he said, gesturing toward a sunny slope near their building site. "Apple trees, maybe some plums. Take years to bear properly, but worth starting." "Years," Olivia echoed, struck by the time span his planning encompassed. Jack met her gaze steadily. "Unless you're planning to leave once winter passes." The question hung between them, finally giving voice to the uncertainty that shadowed their partnership despite their growing closeness. Olivia considered her answer carefully, aware of its significance. "I have nowhere else I want to go," she said honestly, "but I don't wish to assume." "Assume what? That you want me to stay beyond our original agreement?" She looked down at her hands, calloused now from work she would never have imagined doing months ago. "This was your dream first, this valley, this life. I came into it by accident." Jack was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Some accidents are fortunate ones." He poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. "Before you I was existing, not living, building walls of more than just logs." "And now?" Olivia asked softly. "Now I find myself building a home instead of just a shelter." His eyes, reflecting firelight, met hers again. "I'd like you to be part of it, Olivia, not out of necessity or convenience, but because I've come to care for you in ways I didn't think possible anymore." Her heart seemed to skip a beat at his words. "I care for you too, Jack, more than I can properly express. We could make a proper go of it here," he continued, his voice gaining confidence. "Side by side, equal partners, she repeated, testing the word. "Is that what you're proposing?" A flush rose in Jack's cheeks, visible even in the firelight. "I'm proposing whatever you're willing to accept. Companionship, partnership." He hesitated. "Marriage if you wanted it, though I understand if that seems rushed." Olivia found herself smiling at his awkward but heartfelt offer. "Jack Adams, are you asking me to marry you while we sit on logs beside an unfinished cabin?" His answering smile was sheepish but genuine. "I suppose I am, though I'd planned something more romantic once the cabin was completed." "This is perfectly romantic," she assured him, reaching across to take his hand. "And yes to partnership, to marriage, to building a life here together." The joy that transformed Jack's face in that moment was something Olivia knew she would remember for the rest of her days. He rose and moved to sit beside her on her log, his arm encircling her shoulders as they both gazed into the fire. "I never expected this," he admitted, his voice soft with wonder. "When I found you half dead in my clearing, I never imagined you'd become essential to my happiness." "Nor did I imagine that banishment would lead me to the truest freedom I've ever known," Olivia replied, leaning against his solid warmth. As the first snowflakes began to fall gently around them, they sealed their commitment with a tender kiss, the first of many they would share in the valley that had become their sanctuary and their future. The snow that began that night continued intermittently for 3 days, adding urgency to their construction efforts. With the roof in place and walls sealed against the elements, they moved their belongings into the partially finished cabin on the 4th day. Though the interior remained rough dirt floor, incomplete fireplace, and windows covered with oiled paper until Jack could install the precious glass, it provided welcome shelter from the increasingly harsh weather. "Not exactly the home I promised you," Jack apologized as they arranged their meager furnishings, bedrolls, cooking implements, and supply crates that doubled as seating. "It's perfect," Olivia insisted, arranging wildflowers she had gathered before the snow in a tin cup on their makeshift table. "It's ours." Over the next several weeks, as winter settled fully upon Hidden Valley, they completed the cabin's interior in stages. Jack finished the stone fireplace, installed the glass windows, and crafted simple furniture: a table, chairs, storage chests, and a bed frame. Olivia created a comfortable home from their limited resources, using fabric from Johnson's trading post to make curtains and quilts, developing methods to keep their living space clean, and establishing routines that brought order to their days. Christmas arrived with a heavy snowfall that transformed the valley into a glistening wonderland. Unable to travel to the trading post due to deep snow in the mountain passes, they exchanged simple, handcrafted gifts. Olivia presented Jack with a leather-bound journal she had secretly prepared, its pages filled with pressed flowers from the valley and her own drawings of their home's progress. Jack gave her a delicately carved wooden box containing his mother's wedding ring. "I thought we might make it official," he said as she opened the box with trembling fingers. "Not that we need a ceremony out here, but—" "It would mean something to me," Olivia admitted, tears of joy welling in her eyes as he slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. "To promise ourselves to each other properly." They spoke their vows that night beside their hearth, with only the crackling fire and falling snow as witnesses. Simple words, heartfelt commitments, sealed with tender kisses that grew more passionate as the evening progressed. When they finally retired to their new bed, the intimacy they shared felt like the natural culmination of a journey that had begun months before on a dusty trail outside Copper Creek. Winter passed in a peaceful rhythm of work and companionship. They hunted when weather permitted, preserved meat, melted snow for water when the creek froze, and spent evenings reading aloud from the few books they possessed or simply talking by firelight. Jack taught Olivia to play chess using pieces he carved from pine and oak, while she shared songs from her childhood and stories from her teaching days. As January gave way to February, and then March, they began planning for spring. They would need a proper garden, expanded food storage, perhaps even a small barn for the horses and eventually other livestock. Olivia discovered she was with child in late March, bringing new joy and urgency to their preparations. "A baby," Jack whispered in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach as they lay in bed one night. "Our child will be born in this valley, grow up knowing only freedom." "And love," Olivia added, covering his hand with hers. "So much love." April brought the first true thaw, turning Hidden Valley into a riot of wildflowers and fresh green growth. As soon as conditions allowed, Jack made the journey to Johnson's trading post, returning with seeds, additional tools, and news of the outside world. "Thornton's influence is waning," he reported as they unpacked his purchases. "Apparently, he's fallen ill. Some say it's consumption, others say it's the strain of losing his mind's main silver vein." "Do you think he's still looking for me?" Olivia asked, the old fear briefly resurfacing. Jack shook his head. "Johnson says the search was abandoned months ago. Most folks in Copper Creek have forgotten the schoolteacher who ran away." He smiled, taking her hands in his. "We're free, Olivia, truly free." Spring and summer passed in a blur of activity. They planted their garden, started their orchard with saplings Jack brought from the trading post, and completed improvements to the cabin. Jack built a cradle from aspen wood, decorating it with carved animals that Olivia painted using pigments she created from plants and minerals found in the valley. In late September, as aspen leaves turned golden across the mountainsides, their daughter was born, a healthy girl with Jack's blue eyes and Olivia's auburn hair. They named her Hope for what she represented in their lives. "She's perfect," Jack whispered, holding his daughter for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "Absolutely perfect." As Hope grew from infant to toddler, Hidden Valley continued to flourish under their care. They added a small barn, acquired 2 milk cows and chickens, and expanded their garden. Jack built a second cabin nearby that served as a workshop and storage space. Occasionally, they made the journey to Johnson's trading post together, bringing handcrafted items to trade and returning with supplies they couldn't produce themselves. Word of the family living successfully in Hidden Valley spread gradually among settlers and native people alike. Sometimes travelers would appear at their door, seeking shelter for a night or advice on establishing their own homesteads. Jack and Olivia always welcomed them, sharing meals and stories, though they were careful never to reveal too much about their past or Olivia's connection to Copper Creek. On Hope's 3rd birthday, as they celebrated with a special meal and the small wooden rocking horse Jack had crafted for her, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Jack as they sat on their porch watching Hope play in the meadow, chasing butterflies in the late afternoon sunlight. "Taking in a half-dead stranger, losing your cabin, starting over here." Jack's arm tightened around her shoulders as he smiled at their daughter's antics. "Not for a single moment," he replied with absolute certainty. "Everything I lost led me to everything I needed." Olivia leaned into his embrace, her hand resting on her stomach where their second child, a son, she suspected, had just begun to make his presence known. "When I ran from Copper Creek, I thought I was running toward freedom," she mused. "I didn't understand that true freedom comes from finding where you belong." "And where is that?" Jack asked, though the contentment in his voice suggested he already knew her answer. Olivia looked around at the home they had built together, the thriving garden, the growing orchard, the cabin with smoke rising from its chimney, their beautiful daughter playing in the meadow where wildflowers bobbed in the breeze. But most of all, she looked at the man beside her, whose love had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. "Here," she said simply, turning to meet his gaze. "Wherever we are together, that's where I belong." Jack's kiss was as tender as it was passionate, a promise renewed, a commitment deepened by years of shared struggle and joy. As Hope ran toward them, laughing, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that her banishment had been the greatest blessing of her life, leading her not just beyond the ridge, but to the home her heart had always sought.